Welcome back to Shop Talking Street Fame. This is Fabian. Today we have a very special guest in our channel. Today we have a Formula Drift prospect driver. He won the 2022 NASA Florida ST3 Championship. He also won the 2023 USDC Formula Drift Pro-Am Championship. He's not just a prospect driver for drifting. He is also a distributor for a big tire name company, and he has his fingers in a lot of little things when it comes to the motorsports industry here in South Florida. I mean, he's from my hometown, Venezuela, and this guy's amazing. So let's get into the interview, hear what he has to say, and I hope that you enjoy it.
All you gotta do is just start.
Yeah, that's it.
All you gotta do is just start. And if it goes well, great. If it doesn't, let it go.
Fix it and keep going.
Exactly. That's it. All right, guys. So here we are with Lanz, a professional drifter.
Wait a second.
There goes that. Louis is a former drift prospect driver. You won the 22 NASA championship. That was with the Black Vet, right?
The Black C5, yeah.
Nice. And then 2023 USDC Formula D Pro-Am Championship.
Yeah, that's how we got
with the Blue Vet.
With actually, it was green at the time. Well, it was this car is the one that we used in the last round because the car that we were using for that, the motor was going out. So because we were good in points, all we had to do was cross the line, so we used this car.
Okay.
But the car that we had, that we actually competed throughout the championship, was the other Corvette that I'm driving prospect with now.
Okay. All right. Now, Louis, like I was mentioning off camera, a very natural conversation. How did you get into cars? Not into drifting, not into being a professional. What sparked that fire inside of you to get into cars?
So let's see. I guess I'm gonna give like one thing that I'm noticing is like when I'm talking to you and it's sideways, like como que the camera's there. Okay. I don't know if you move a little closer, I think it'll look better. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Hey, I'll take any suggestions.
But I think it's like because it's more like the
angle.
Bean Wiki. Bean Wiki is usually like that. They're not looking at the camera, but it's like
but it's not so far away.
But it's not so far. Yeah.
We'll do it like this.
All right. So how did I start it?
Let's start over.
All right.
Because that way we can get this part set. Okay. All right, guys. So here we are. Lanz, professional drift, Formula Drift driver. He's the 2022 NASA Florida ST3 champion, and that's not drifting. That's with the Vet. So that's grip driving, right?
That's grip driving, the black. And actually that one's grip too.
Okay, beautiful. So you got the C5 and the C7.
Yeah.
Amazing ones. And then you also won 2 years ago, the 2023 USDC Formula D Pro-Am Championship.
Yeah, that's how we got our Formula Drift Pro license.
Nice. Now, as we were speaking off camera, a very natural conversation. We'll get to the drifting part of things and how you became a professional driver and all that. But what sparked your fire inside of you to get into cars? What got your attention, and what was the moment that said, I love cars?
So I guess obviously it starts at a very young age, Hot Wheels and little cars, always obsessed with them. And as I got older, my parents got me a Power Wheels, like the little battery cars, and they couldn't get me out of it. I think I burnt the motor on the first one that we got. So, and then as I got older, whenever they took me to go-karts, it's something that I just wanted to be driving something. It's naturally that I felt like that was what I wanted to do. But I played baseball instead. So I did baseball, tennis, and all the other sports. Because obviously, when you go into motorsports, it's ridiculously expensive.
Yes,
we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But it was always, in the back of my head, like I need to do something with motorsports. It's my passion, and basically my whole life, I just built something up to be able to do it.
What was your first project that you had as a teenager, maybe as a kid?
So when you think about projects, you already know that it's going to be expensive, right?
Yeah.
And when I started with the whole cars thing, I couldn't afford projects. I was like out of the question. So my first car was a Ford Focus, and I never did anything to it, honestly. The only thing that I was able to get was suspension for it because I was doing autocross.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it wasn't really a project. I just modified it to match my needs.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially because I knew how expensive a project was, and I just wasn't up for spending that kind of money.
Yeah.
And then later on, so I figured out that project cars are way cheaper than building a project car, you know? So most people that start a project, they don't get to finish it. And so most of the work is already done. So I would try to find deals like that. That's how I got an 02 Bug-Eye. Aftermarket turbos, basically body kit, like it was like Subaru
Classics.
classic. Like it was blue with I was always a Colin McRae fan, like from rallying.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, remember that blue Subaru with the gold on the side? That was like my, oh my God, I gotta have one of
the
those.
rally driver.
Yeah. So I saw that car at the auction and I jumped on it. It was extremely cheap. I think I paid like $4,500 for it or something.
STI or WRX?
No, it was WRX. So the Bug-Eye on 02, I think STIs didn't come up until 2004. I'm sure Subaru fans are gonna correct me.
Yeah.
Being outside of the Subaru family for a while. But yeah, it was an 02 WRX. They didn't have STIs at the time. So obviously I started learning in the Subaru world. And as we all know, the first thing that I broke on that thing was the transmission.
I'm surprised you didn't go for the head gasket.
Well, yeah, obviously that's a normal thing that it always happens. But yeah, transmissions on all tools, WRXs are made out of glass. Nice. So that's when I would call that my first project, essentially. Okay. Which later on, I was always money conscious. I didn't want to buy something and spend a bunch of money and then lose money on it. Mm-hmm. So my goal was always like, okay, if I buy it cheap enough, I can use it, enjoy it, and then sell it either for more or the same amount.
Break even,
exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what I ended up doing with that car is, so back then, Subaru forums, I think even today, they're still very popular. Basically, I posted everything aftermarket that the car had for sale. And with obviously, whenever anybody wanted to buy something, they had to give me their stock part, which that's what they were going to do anyway. Yeah, so everybody was like, oh, for sure. Like, I'm not going to do anything with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sold turbos, like everything off of that car.
So you had a big turbo on it?
Yeah, it had I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was aftermarket turbo, to cool the turbo, the intercooler. Okay. Massive intercooler in the front. It was kind of like a built WRX. So nice. I put that thing all back to stock ECU, stock everything, and that's what happened. Made some money off of it and sold it. The point that I realized that I didn't want to do project stuff was when that transmission broke. Mm-hmm. The thing to build those transmissions were PPG gears, which were straight cut gears. Extremely expensive. I think it was like $4,000 that I had to spend on that. And that's when I'm like, yeah, this cost me the same as the whole car. I took it all out, sold everything, made my money back, and just learned that I could just buy project cars, put them back to stock, and enjoy them when they were, built, and then
So that's what you did. Essentially, you like buy modified cars,
get
them back to stock spec, and sell them.
Pretty much.
And you will get more money out of it.
Make my money.
Obviously, because you never get your money back when you build a car.
Exactly.
You lose a lot of money. Yeah. That's a smart way of looking at it.
And no one ever pays the amount of money that you throw at it.
No.
You're getting close. Usually the retail or the sell market value for a car is the same as it's in the street, whether it has upgrades or not.
Yeah, I think the only car that we could say is not like that would be the Supra and MK4 Supra. Those things. Right. I think that's the only car that it's an asset more than a liability.
And I think nowadays, because it's like a niche market, but back in the day, it was basically the same thing for Supras. It didn't really matter.
Yeah, I remember you can get an MK4 for like $9,000, $10,000. Yeah. And now they're what, 100?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So you went on from the Focus to a Subaru. What came after the Subaru?
After the Subaru, I think I got another STI. But I also got a 350Z. I don't remember which one I got first, but it was an 07 STI Hawkeye.
Nice.
Same thing. It had a beautiful body kit and dropped wheels. This didn't have so many engine upgrades, but it was an STI. You know, I didn't have to worry about the whole thing. But ultimately, same thing that happens with all Subarus, engine problems.
Yep.
Yeah, I got the STI. I think I got the 350Z after the STI when I was like, okay, I'm done with trying to deal with Subaru stuff.
Now, did you get into grip racing, track racing / autocrossing with the STI or with the Subaru, or that was once you got into the 350Z?
So I started autocrossing since I had a Ford Focus. It was like the first car I got, it was like within weekends, I was already doing my first autocross event.
Was it an SVT?
No,
it wasn't.
It was a CX-3.
My first car was a Ford Focus too, and it was a base one.
Yeah,
and I wanted the SVT so bad. It was. Cool.
It's funny because the car didn't even have a tachometer, dude. It was just like this camera in the middle.
Same thing with mine. It was just a base model, manual windows.
Yeah,
everything. It was beautiful,
and I loved it. But it was just like, man, I don't know what RPMs to shift. It's like, sure, I could hear it, but it was like, Ford Focus isn't fast to begin with.
No.
So you really want to shift it at the right point. So
I sprayed mine.
I
put a 50 shot on mine.
Oh, yeah.
It handled it till I sold it, but it was a fun little car.
So it was like, I even got one of the big Fast and the Furious tachometers with the yellow light. It worked for like a month or two, but then something with the car and the ignition system didn't go with it well, and then it stopped working. It was...
I'm going to make you laugh right now. I had the same problem because I had no tachometer. I bought an eBay RPM gauge the size of the whole cluster.
Yeah.
I put it on the side, on the A-pillar.
Fast and
with the light.
Style.
Exactly. And I was wiring it up to the ignition. It read completely wrong. It said I was revving it to 9,000. It was said I was idling at like 3,500. I'm like, this is completely wrong, but whatever. It works. That's all I care. I did my little shift light. I'm like, I'm so fast.
Like that thing's revving to 9,000.
Yeah. Looking back to it.
It felt fast. It
was the first car, right? Yeah. So it's like you were young and dumb, and you were learning.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's fun times.
Definitely.
So the autocrossing. You got into the autocrossing with a Focus. When did you get serious with it?
Honestly, not for a while. I probably did autocross for like 8, maybe 10 years. Until eventually I started. I've always wanted to do track days, but track days were a lot more expensive, you know, 300 plus. Autocross was $50. Yep. You know, it was more reachable. Even though when you do the math between a track day and an autocross, you're getting way more bang for your buck on the track days. When you go to an autocross, it's like 30-second run, and you get 5 of those. So you're really only racing for 3 minutes for $50.
Whereas track days,
you get 20-minute sessions, multiple sessions. So you're spending $300, $350 for a whole hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on the event.
So the cost for your seat time is a lot better in track days.
Oh, 100%, which is something that a lot of people don't realize it.
I didn't know about that. We talked a little bit on the previous interview with another shop. It was, same thing, same scenario between the quarter-mile racing and track racing.
Oh, same thing.
I mean, you're running, let's say a fast car, 8-second car. That's 8 seconds of seat time.
Even if you're running a slow car, give it 14 seconds.
That's only 14 seconds of seat time compared to a few hours on the track.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. And
it's massive.
You get to know your car a lot better in 3 hours.
You don't have to wait in line the whole time waiting to go. Autocross, you have to work. You're a corner worker. So when you're not running for those 30 seconds, you have to go stand in the corners whenever somebody goes. If a cone is dropped, you have to go pick it up and stuff. So it's like, it's $50, but you're working and it's under the sun. It's not holding anything against autocrossers. If it's something that you love to do, by all means.
Yeah.
It's just if you want to look at it from the bang for your buck, it's really
You're
in
better
terms of
off going
seat
on
time. Track for sure.
Nice.
Takes it.
Now, you became a race instructor, a driver instructor, correct?
Yeah.
At some point. Am I skipping a lot of history?
No, really. It's after the whole autocross thing. I started doing my first track day. So I was able to afford or, pony up the $300 and go for my first track day, in which I was able to, get involved, meet people. Essentially, after a few track days, since I've been doing autocross for so long, I was able to basically jump through the steps, because you start as a student, then you go to intermediate, advanced, and finally you get your instructor license. Which I was able to go through those within a year, more or less. Ultimately, that was the goal, because instructors don't pay for track days. So those $350. You have to work it. Obviously, you have a student the whole day, which you have to teach them and basically step by step of the things that they can and can't do. But ultimately, that was my goal, for me to be able to get track time, essentially, without having to pay.
Free seat time.
Exactly.
Now, being an instructor, I'm sure that you have some crazy stories that has happened with a student driver in the driver's seat. I'm assuming you're being an instructor in Homestead?
Yeah, I actually did instructing all throughout the United States. Luckily, when I basically started being an instructor, there was this company that just opened up. I think they bought out the rights to Hooked on Driving.
Okay.
It was called the HPDE, and they really wanted to do events across the country.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough to be with them at that time, and we did from Homestead, PBIR, Atlanta, Road Atlanta, Georgia, forgot the name of the Savannah track. Basically all the East Coast tracks. It was quite some time now. Yeah. Barber, even up to Thunderhill. Oh, Vegas, not Vegas Motor Speedway, but the one that does the Rumfellows.
I'm not familiar.
Things, multiple tracks. So luckily, I was able to do.
Yeah, all over the states.
Oh, yeah, all over the states, and the Corvette Museum track.
Nice.
That one's amazing.
Nice.
So essentially, what we started doing is whenever we had an event out of town, I would land. Back then, they had the Camaros for rent in Avis or budget. And dude, those were the best rental track cars that you could get.
Were they SSs? No.
Yeah, SSs.
They were SSs.
Yeah.
That's fun.
And they also had the Mustang GTs, but the Mustangs were not as fun because of the transmission. Like whenever you would shift, it had a delay. It would overheat. Dude, the SSs was like the best track car to buy, like bone stock. It was like you're supposed to change the brake fluid. But when they were like brand new, like 2,000 miles, you could get like 5 laps out of it before you overheat the stock fluid on those cars.
That's interesting.
So that was it. Like I would land in Atlanta, go to the rental place. I would put like 5 reservations. You didn't have to pay for them until you actually got the car. So we'll go to Avis budget. Like they always leave the doors open. So let's go which one has the lowest miles, check the tire wear, because some people will rent them and then do burnouts. So you didn't want to get a car that had like
no
bad tires or low on tires. Same as the brakes and stuff. So basically inspect, all right, out of like 10, they usually had like 10 or 15 Camaros. So you're like, okay, this is the one I want. Grab the keys, go to a rental. Yeah, rent this one right here. Dude, it was the best. It was like $50 a day. And we would drive those cars.
You got a track car for $50 a day.
Yeah.
That's
basically.
Good heck.
Obviously, you take the risk.
Do not do it, viewers. Do not do it.
I mean, if you're doing that, you are taking the risk. Even if you buy the insurance, that insurance does not cover track damage.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, that's on you.
But essentially, when you are a track person that you go to a track, it's the same as your own car. You know, essentially, you're just not spending the money on the maintenance for it.
Yeah.
So I already knew, like, look, if I put this thing into a wall, I know I got to come up with 30 grand. Like that's the way to do it. If you don't have the way of getting that into your head and knowing that if you crash a car, you have to buy it, then don't do it. It's not worth it. But it's essentially as when you have your own car and you take it to the track, right? Like if you crash
if you crash it, your insurance is not going to cover it.
Even though there are insurance for tracks now.
But you have to purchase those at the track, right?
Either at the track or a week in advance. Like they ask you some questions and you do it. Okay. But I've always been kind of against insurances. The way I see it is like you're betting against yourself. You know that, right? Like you're putting money up front that
you're gonna crash.
That you're gonna crash. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So I always saw it that way. I was like, no, like I'm not betting against myself.
It's more pressure. More pressure. I ain't got no insurance, so I gotta make sure I don't crash.
Exactly.
That's funny. Now, what's the craziest thing that a student made you go through?
So I'm pretty sure Danny told you his stories. It's like, he did. I do not have anything.
And that's why I'm coming out with this question, because crashing at 130 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's
with a medical condition guy in the seat. That's a hell of a story to top it out. And I think I'm going to make it for the channel. Be like, who can top this one?
Yeah.
Because that was insane.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the guys that could top that have actually died on the instructor seat, and
let's not do that.
Yeah, it's really sad that can happen. But I did get your usual guy that really didn't care much about the turns and would just wanted to throw it on the straight. The scariest track for me to instruct that was PBIR. Because PBIR had that back straight, which is the longest freaking straight that there is on like any track that I've.
Is that longer than Sebring? No, Sebring has
maybe
a pretty long
it's
straight.
Not as long. I'm not too sure. It's extremely long. The problem with that turn is that at the end you're coming into a very sharp hairpin, right-hander hairpin.
Yeah,
and that was the scariest thing because it's like your brakes fail. You're going straight at it. And unfortunately, one of our instructors died on the passenger seat at that turn. So this happened when I basically stopped instructing. It got to the point that being in the instructor's seat was taking a lot more of my time from actually doing things. So essentially, it was easier for me to just pay the $300 than to keep doing the instructing. Because when you go for a track day, it's not only your testing time, your practice time. After that, you got to go through the car, make changes to it, see what you want to do. If you're instructing, you don't really have that hour complete. You might have 20 minutes to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not feasible. It doesn't make sense. But I guess the funniest or the closest thing that I can have is I had a guy that he brought not a Hellcat, but a Challenger with a big V8.
The SRT.
But I don't know if it was SRT because the suspension was, that was like a boat. And I don't know if the SRTs are like that. I've never actually driven one. And from what I remember, that thing was a boat.
Was it a Challenger or a Charger? Like the
Challenger.
Okay. Yeah. They're either of them. They're boats.
Yeah.
They're boats. They're big.
But the turns, like he would take them like somewhat slow. But when that straight was coming, he just wanted to get to the fastest speed that he can. And I kept looking at him, and he was just paying attention to the speedometer. Like I guess he just wanted to see how fast he can say that he got this car to. And so after a couple of straights like that, I'm like, no, that's it. Park it. I'm not gonna stay in this car.
Yeah, you're not being responsible.
Yeah. So
I mean, when you're getting into that turn, it's like you said, it's a sharp turn.
Yeah,
it's not like Sebring where it's a very wide turn to take.
And if the car felt good, it would have been okay. But the brakes were squealing. There was vibration at high speeds, like really bad. So it was like, as much as I can trust the student that he was gonna brake, I didn't really trust the car that he was gonna respond.
Yeah.
So I told him to park it and be like, look, I can't be on that car with you because I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's a safety thing. And it's not like they're prep cars. Those are personal cars. They don't have cages.
Yeah.
You know, the guy's learning. So how far can you really push the car with somebody that doesn't know how far he can actually go?
Yeah.
And the braking. I mean, braking is I had my
breaking that big boat at that speed.
Exactly. I mean, they might have big Brembo brakes, but you're still breaking a 4,000 plus pound car.
Yeah.
Doing a $160.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's. I mean, and it's a weight car, so the turn.
And I don't think it had the Brembos. I don't think it was an SRT. I think it was just the
like
SS,
302 kind of
or
thing.
not the SS, but the V8.
Yeah.
And just with stock brakes, it was bad.
Yeah,
It was
that's
bad.
dangerous. And then the overheating 2-3 laps in it, breaking it that hard, then you're fading. Brake fade.
Yeah.
Serious.
Yeah, 100%.
That's crazy. So what was next after your instructor time?
So after instructing, I actually did instructing for quite some time. I was more concentrating on having a family, and I think that's when my kids came along. So I still did the instructing just to stay on relevant, keep getting seat time. Because the other thing about instructing is like you're learning as you go as well. Like even though you're not in the seat, you're still in the car. You're seeing what he's doing wrong. You're trying to improve it. So mentally, you're growing with your student, basically. It doesn't matter how good of a driver you are. When you instruct, it's just like it's helping your development.
Yeah.
And I was, if it was like flying hours, I think if racing drivers had like seat time hours, I think instructing would add on to those hours. 100%.
Absolutely.
So after instructing, it was years, probably like 10 years until I was able to. One of my students, or one of the guys that I met through the whole instructing and track days, he reached out to me and he told me, "Hey, I have a seat on a 350Z for a FARA race. Do you want to take it?" And I'm like, 100%, let's go. I'm finally going to be able to compete and see how good I stack up. Because it was always iffy. I remember I did good lap times, but it wasn't like, all right, I'm down to put my money, 50 grand on a car and go compete and see if I do good.
Yep.
That was too big of a gamble for me. But thanks to him, Walter, he basically got me behind the seat on the car. In our first race, I think we ended up second place on podium in FARA.
In your first race?
In our first race, yeah.
But that wasn't your car. That you were racing for the team.
I was racing for him. He had a car that it was mostly endurance races, but we had sprints before the final endurance race. So on one of those sprints that I raced, we got second. So that was like a big eye opener for me.
Yeah.
Even though FARA is obviously not the biggest, or back in the day, it wasn't like a big accomplishment, but it was still really big for me to be able to go compete and end up.
You got there your first race. It's a competitive race.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you get their second place. That must be a feeling of like,
so I can do it, right?
I can do this.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what happened to me. Once that happened, we were like, okay, let's keep going. Let's try to get more time, more advance. It was always like, Walter, when are we racing again? Let's go.
I got the bug.
Yeah. And at the same time, I was able to get some money aside to actually, okay, I can do this. I can spend some money in it, not go crazy, but still be able to be somewhat competitive. So essentially, that's when I got the C5 for the first time. Again, I already knew that projects were expensive to build from the ground up. So I looked around and found this car, Ken Mantovani. He's one of a really good road racers that lives in West Palm. And he had this car for sale. And he was basically another Corvette nut. He races and builds Corvettes. So I was able to snatch this from him at a pretty decent price, but he still needed some work done. But I got this somewhat like summer of 21. And then this was by myself driving the car and trying to figure things out. We went to Daytona for a NASA event race, which I hadn't been to Daytona in years, probably 4 or 5 years, the last time I drove there. And we're trying to figure out the car, but we got to our first NASA ST3 race. And after figuring out and dealing with the whole NASA, you have to do have a dyno sheet and submit it, and based on the weight of the car, that's how you get your thing. So it kind of takes a big learning curve if you don't have anybody guiding you, which I didn't. It was basically me trying to figure out, and I knew this is a car I found, so I need to put it in this class, and points based on tires and
weight, power.
Yeah. So on that race, we start out. I did a horrible qualifying because I didn't remember the track. I got there late because I didn't pass the whole tech thing that they had, because there was something missing on one of my documents for all the things to sign up for the class.
So it wasn't, you didn't pass tech because of the car. You didn't pass tech
because I didn't have the paperwork. Yeah, I didn't have the paperwork properly set up.
Yeah.
And I got there late too. We ran out of fuel on the way. Dude, it's so funny because I had tuned this car for E85 and I was towing with a Tahoe. And so the line keeps getting lower. I'm like, oh, I'm going to stop in the next one. It's okay. If anything, I have, luckily, Tahoe's flex fuel. So when we ran out of fuel, I took out one of the E85 from the car, put it on, and we were able to make it to the Daytona hotel.
That's funny.
But anyway, we went into that first race, and I think we started on probably like 10th, and I think the field was 18 cars or something like that.
Okay.
And within the first 3-4 laps, I find myself like second. Like I was able to pass multiple people and got myself there. And I'm so excited because Daytona is so fast, and we're going at it, like fighting these guys. I'm not taking the best line, but since the first group was fighting for position, I was able to like move along. But towards the end, when it was like maybe 2-3 laps left, the slave cylinder gave out on the car, which meant I couldn't really shift the car, or shifting was very slow for me. So Daytona is very fast, and it comes down to like very slow sections, like the bus stop, where you had to go from like 5th gear all the way down to like 2nd gear, and then you go up to 5th or 6th gear, depending on the transmission that you have on your car. Because after bus stop, that's like the fastest part. And so yeah, when that happened, dude, like everybody started passing me because I was slow. I couldn't
you were
shift.
done. You couldn't shift.
But I'm like, dude, our first NASA race, and we almost got podium. You know, if the car would have stayed together, we would have made it. So that was my thing. It's like, okay, I'm throwing everything at it. Like we can compete and be competitive on, especially, you know, like Daytona. I think that year was like the championship race later on those days at Daytona. So the main guys were there because they were practicing for the championship race that was going to be there a few months later. So when that happened, after that first race, obviously we had to pack up because we couldn't drive this car like that. But I was already like, okay, we're going to rebuild the trans, rebuild the rear end, basically go through the whole car. So we're good, and we start testing this year. So for next year, we go for that championship. So we built that motor. We had the motor built and basically rebuilt everything. The only thing that I cheaped out on was getting the motor rebuilt, which I did it locally with one of our guys here. His first time building a motor.
Oh.
That was not my.
So you didn't take it to a machine shop
he did.
Quote unquote,
he did, but putting it together was like, I think the tolerances weren't there because we went for testing one day and we popped that motor first time.
First time around, you popped it.
So that's when I learned from Ken. He's like, no, dude, I never built motors. I just buy crash motors from the junkyard that have never been opened, low mileage, and that's what I drive on. Especially for NASA, because you're not going for that power, because you're restricted based on where you are on for example, SC3. So that's what I did. I found a low mileage LS2 out of an automatic that had probably like 60,000 miles, and threw it on this, and
went on racing.
It went on racing for 22.
So it costs you an arm and a leg to build a motor. You blew it up the first time around, and you ended up with a junkyard motor. And was that motor the one that took you to the championship?
The LS2, and it's still in it.
You still in it?
It's still in it.
So 4 years later, you're still running a junkyard motor. going through hell and back, but it's still running.
It's still running. Yeah,
So,
man, things that come from factory that have been proven to be in a car for X amount of miles,
mhm.
you're not gonna go wrong with that.
Yep.
It's meant to go.
Why fix it if it ain't broken?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment you open a motor, that's when you have to make sure everything that you do is perfect.
Yeah.
So even though it's machine built, man, those machines are calibrated. Like if it's a known product that has been used and it's not gonna fail, you know, it's not gonna fail.
No, absolutely. So we're about to talk about the NASA championship in 2022. What was the highlight of the year aside from the podium, right? Aside from lifting the trophy, saying I'm champion of the NASA ST3 series. What was something that you can say, wow, that was amazing during that period of the race?
I think it was mostly we built this car to win, right?
Mhm.
So it was a huge learning curve from me for all the things that I needed to do, and so we put an ABS on it. Right? I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's like a Bosch M5 ABS, which essentially it's like the Porsches. The way the Porsches brake,
Mhm.
you can stamp on it and it'll do the work for you.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it makes you an amazing driver.
Memorable moment before, aside from being in the podium and winning the championship, in that period that you can say is like, wow, that was amazing.
I guess after I finally building the car and being able to start getting more podiums, that was the main thing. You know, it was like proof, like, okay, we got this, like we can actually do it, and we can go for the full championship. That was like the main or the fuel to keep going, basically.
That feeling of satisfaction of saying, God, we did it. You know, it's like we can actually run this class and win.
Yeah. Especially, it was the biggest field class that year because Spec Corvette didn't have a class on their own.
Okay.
So I think ST3 had maybe like 10 to 15 drivers, and then they added another 10 to 15 Spec Corvette drivers. So it was like a field of 30 sometimes.
Cars. Wow.
And it was a lot of fun. It was pretty amazing. Another positive thing that happened, basically at the beginning or mid-season, there was this race in Homestead, and it started like just like any other race, but we got to a point that it started raining.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of the times that I was doing instructing and track days on my own, whenever it rained, everybody would like come in, like they wouldn't want to drive in the rain. But for me, that was like the time to be out on the track. I felt like I learned so much driving in the rain that whenever it rained, it was perfect. I spent less brakes, less gas, less tires. Just everything was perfect. And whenever it rained, it was just me going laps after laps after laps, trying to learn, you know, how to deal with the rain. So I felt like rain for me was like my ultimate place to be at. And also watching, I've always been a huge Senna fan, and I knew how good he was in the rain. So basically, I wanted to be just like Senna. Like whenever it rained, that had to be my race. And I was never able to put it to test, right? Like I drove in the rain a lot. I will get my own lap times. I will set my personal records, but I was never driving against anybody else, so I had no clue. Comes that day at Homestead, that race. I actually have it on my YouTube channel. I'm so proud of that race that I put it there. That we start out, I find myself in front of the field and I start like lapping people. And then so much that I catch on to ST2, which is the next class, which higher horsepower, basically, you know, you're not supposed to be as fast as them.
Yeah.
So I catch up to that class and I start passing them. And these are already like Porsches, like built Porsches that are like really fast. and I'm fighting on ST2 that I'm not supposed to be there whatsoever. That was like the highlight of my day. It was like, damn, all the hard work that I put driving in the rain and risking the cars, because when it rains, it's higher chances that you're gonna crash, basically, or that you're gonna come off track and break something. So all that hard work and all that risk shown that it was paying off, and I loved it. It was like where I wanted to be.
That speaks volumes as the driver, you know, because you're obviously driving a car that's not supposed to be keeping up with the next class, and you're passing them. Going back to the Senna thing, I heard that you were obviously a very big Senna fan, and that you tried to mimic his technique of kicking the car a little bit to get into the corner. Did that work out for you at any time during any race, or was that just something that it happened and you're like, okay, I wanna test it? Like, did you purposely test that theory out, or is it something you liked?
So yes and no. It's mostly on very slow corners, and it's extremely difficult to get it right every time. At least for me, I couldn't personally do it. If I was going for a fast lap time, maybe I could try it a couple times, but ultimately it just I like the skill to be able to.
That's a good one.
Do that every single time, or I could say also I like the practice. It takes a lot to be able to master that, and cars are different, so it's one of those things. I also don't know if it's something that it was more beneficial back in the day because of the way the suspension and the cars wear and the tires. Whereas if you're on a race and you want to be able to keep getting time away from everybody else, if you're doing something that works and you can stay consistent on it and you're getting time from that, you stay doing that. You know, you don't want to try
change it
up basically. So I wish I had more track times and more days to actually test that out.
Yeah, to practice that little thing.
Yeah.
This is a trick. I mean, Senna.
It's something else.
Yeah, that's huge. Legend, obviously.
Definitely.
So we're gonna get into the drifting now. So obviously you became champion of the NASA championship. Were you already starting to get involved in the drifting side of things when you won that championship, or that's just a switch that happened?
I was. I started doing drifting in 2019.
Okay.
That's when I got a 370C just for that. And it's basically between instructing and I managed to get into drifting at the same time. Basically, what launched me to go into drifting was Duarte from Drift HQ, who's a really good friend of mine. And at the time, I would drift with them, but I was more concentrated in my racing career. Like, racing was my main thing, and I would do some drift events whenever I had the shot or a chance. There was a race in Sebring that I had won the weekend prior. And Duarte went to see it, and he comes up to me and he's like, dude, this is the most depressed thing ever. There's no fans here. And it's true. In racing, there's really, when you compare it to a drift event, it's like night and day.
Yeah,
drifting gets packed up.
Yeah.
Racing, it's very like when you go into a race, you see the car go by once, and that's really cool. But once you just keep seeing the same thing over and over from the same corner, it gets repetitive.
Not boring, but repetitive. Yeah. That's the correct word.
So obviously, fans on race days like that are not common. And I remember Duarte saying, like, dude, you should just go drift competitively. Like, you can do it. You can win championships and events in drifting. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I want to, but it's like, I can't do both. It's too much. But we'll see. And it's that weekend after, there was a drift competition for Pro-Am for 22. That was like the 22 series. I hadn't competed in any of them. But I was like, let's go give it a shot. Let's see what we can do. So we go to that Pro-Am event. That was actually on this car. It was red back then, before we did this livery. And we go there and we win that competition. So that the weekend before we win the NASA race, and then the weekend after we win the Pro-Am drift
In the completely different type of
in a completely different motorsport. And that's when, you know, it clicked. It's like, it was packed with people, same spot. It was a Sebring too, but it was like just the difference of like podium was like hundreds of people, whereas in NASA it was like quite a few, most of us family and things like that.
The team.
Yeah. And same thing, the artist is like, you see, I told you can do it. You have to come into drifting. So that was a big eye opening for me. Kind of like the same thing. Like I didn't know that I could do it, but we did it, and we beat a couple of big names in the drift scene. So it was like, okay, like we'll see how this championship goes on because it was in the middle of the racing season, and then maybe we do something for next year. Maybe do both or something like that. We'll see how far the road racing will take us. So from that point on, it was just like the support on the drift side was much larger. It's easier to get sponsorships.
Talk to me about sponsorships, because I think a lot of people watching have this dream, right? This dream of like becoming maybe not the best at something, but becoming a professional in any kind of motorsports. Because motorsports, as we spoke earlier, it's very expensive. Yeah. I mean, it's not just the cars to get the cars themselves, but it's also the maintenance and everything behind the scenes. I mean, you have to have a parts file because you want to be able to fix it right then and there on the spot. You want to have spare tires. You want to have spare brakes. You want to have like anything that can go wrong. Want to have two of them because you don't want your weekend to get cut out early. Now, how hard was it for you when you started getting into the idea of actually doing something with the drifting to get sponsored, and who sponsored you?
So that's probably the $1 million question when it comes to motorsports, right? Like how to get the funds to keep going. And there's this saying in motorsports, I keep repeating it, but if you want to become a millionaire in motorsports, you got to start a billionaire. You know, like there's no way of building an empire out of it, especially when you race, when you're want to do it yourself. Sponsorships is a very touchy subject, and it's very difficult because of how expensive things are, right? Usually any other form of sports, it's a lot cheaper, you know. Even golf, if you put it, golf sounds expensive, but when you compare it to drifting or racing, it's absolutely
pennies on the dollar.
Nothing. One weekend of tires will probably afford your whole year of golfing. You know, like it's ridiculous the difference in money. So obviously, from a company's point of view, it's way cheaper to advertise in other venues than in motorsports. So I've always been an advocate of telling people to try to do something where you will find your funds with what you're doing, rather than just asking companies for those funds.
Gotcha.
Nowadays, it's a little bit difficult because it doesn't matter if you're good. It doesn't matter if you win. You just have to have the following. You know, social media is
changed the game.
It changed the game, right? So back in the day, drivers would just concentrate on practicing, training, and doing everything they could possibly can to just win, and that gets you the sponsors. Now it's not like that. Winning helps a little bit, but what you really need to have is good content, or a lot of content, and a lot of following. Exactly. So you got to be good at marketing, driving, you know, talking to people. It's all these extra things that are falling into a driver that they need to make happen to be able to, you know, for it to make happen. Basically, you got to be good at public speaking. You know, it's like a bunch of things that. So from early on, I understood how difficult that was, and I always tried to concentrate more on the business side of, okay, how can I make money to be able to afford doing it and have a living wage out of it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are some companies that you come across while networking and trying to find ways,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, that we were able to get them to jump in. But ultimately, the main sponsor for yourself or anybody going into this is yourself.
Yeah.
That's essentially how it's. Could you pause it?
Mm-hmm.
We were in the middle of the interview, and perfect timing, brother. He just got back the car that he was using for the event of Vegas that he ran through. This is his spare vehicle. It's a freaking machine, brother. I mean, we're gonna wait to see for them to finish pulling it up. But nice little surprise we got in the middle of the shoot. But I'll take it because this car, I'm pretty sure it sounds rowdy.
So we are back. We had a little interruption. Very nice surprise bringing your other car. Talk to me a little bit about this car that we just saw on off the trailer coming in. You said that was in Vegas right now?
Yes.
It came from Vegas?
Yeah. So once we load up the rig for Formula Drift, it leaves and it doesn't come back until the end of the season. We had a little mishap with the trailer that one of the axles broke or whatever, so it stayed back there longer than usual. But basically, we do Atlanta, New Jersey, St. Louis, and Utah, and we hit up different events nearby where we're at. When we end up in Utah, Signova has a warehouse in Vegas where we can store the car in the meantime. And we do California events like Hot Pit and things like that. And eventually, at the end of the season, we try to hit up events on the way back. And if not, just bring it back all throughout. We stayed in Vegas for quite some time doing that. So the car just got here last week. And we basically just loaded it up and took it to Fuel Fest Tampa.
Yep.
And now we had another issue with the trailer that the lift broke. So I couldn't bring back both cars. So my buddy Savio was able to bring it back just now.
Gotcha.
So we just got him.
So that's why we got that little surprise there with the car coming in. It's amazing. I was asking you, I don't know if I caught it on film, but about the fuel. You said you're running pure E85 on?
Yeah, so it's pure E85, depending on the brand. Like we don't really go with one specific, just basically where we're at, because there's different distributors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very small tune whenever we switch. But it's basically 100% proof E85.
Okay.
I think it's like 98 because they have to add 2% for
2% fuel. I think it was for
like
burning purposes.
Yeah, or I think it's so people don't drink it because it's pure alcohol.
Oh, that's right.
Something like that.
It's funny enough. Last night, you're 100% not right. Last night I saw you're familiar with Cletus, right? Cletus Carlin. Well, he actually pulled up a video about running his the Corvette, the red Corvette, running it on pure what's it called? The drink from the south, moonshine. On pure moonshine. So they says like E85 is essentially not moonshine, but it's very similar in alcohol tendencies, but they have to add fuel so people don't drink it, because legally if you put it 100% ethanol, then it becomes an alcoholic drink. Like moonshine. Yeah, apparently that's.
And it's probably way cheaper too, right?
Not really, because of moonshine. Mind you, it didn't make that much horsepower. Most likely because he essentially tuned it. He got on the dyno, ran regular fuel, then ran just the 85, just in that switch.
Right.
Same tune, same boost level, same timing level. It gained about 70 horsepower just from changing to the wheels, just for changing it to 85. And then from E85 straight moonshine, and it lost about 100 horsepower, but it needed 45% more fuel than E85. So the computer automatically spit out more fuel than E85. So that tells you something. I mean, maybe you can.
Maybe we can run a moonshine.
Whenever you're in North Carolina, throw some moonshine in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's funny. So going back to the drifting, you started it. You got sponsored. What was the biggest challenges that you've come across once you made the switch to Formula D?
It's so in the competitive level, there's a lot more rules and things that you have to follow. That when you go out there for the first year, it's a big learning curve. Essentially, because you're not familiar with the track, you get very little practice. We actually get probably like 4 to 5 laps before we have to go into competition.
Okay.
So basically 4 to 5 laps to figure out this new track that you've never been on, and then go do the best lap of your life, in comp, which is like why it's very difficult prospect to pro. And you can see on the live streams whenever, if you're not familiar with it and you see prospect run, it's like, man, this guy's really bad, right? But essentially it's everybody's on the same thing. Like we only got 4 to 5 laps to figure out the gearing on the car, make any adjustments on suspension, your alignment, your tire pressure, you want more grip, less grip, and you only get 4 to 5 laps to figure that out and then go for a run. It's essentially really hard. So one thing that I started trying to learn when I started on Prospect was go to a track for the first time ever, do 1, 2, 3 laps and try to gather as much information as possible. I learned this after Atlanta, obviously, once we messed up. Record the runs from the inside cabin and then just playing back to back while you're waiting to go next on your next run. So you can kind of have a feel of, okay, this is what I got to do here. I got to extend this a little more, go faster here, don't let off here, things like that, to try to learn it better. Because one of the things that I've done on every other competition that I've done is usually you have hours or 2 hours of practice. I'll go nonstop, lap after lap after lap, just learning the car, learning the track, making the adjustments that we need to make to try to go for that 100% point lap, right? Which in Formula D, you can't. It's not there. Yeah. So I had to find ways to be able to figure that out and do the best lap that we can without having the practice on the car, essentially.
Yeah. No, that's a challenge. I mean, just having 5 lap runs, it's
the biggest challenge.
It's a different track. You don't have that much data to go along. And, if you make a mistake in one of those lap runs, you don't have a rerun.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Talk to me about the championship, 2024. That was 2023.
So back to Pro-Am.
Yeah. How was that when you? How did it feel when you won for the first time?
So Pro-Am, when we first started, I was like, I went on it to let's give it a shot. But a good friend of mine, Henry from Drift Gang, he's also one of them, the ones that pushed me to go for it. Because I know the amount of work and responsibilities that it entails to go after that. So I was always like, man, let's slow down, let's go. We got to try to build momentum and figure out the financials of everything before we make that jump. So for Pro-Am, we were definitely like, all right, let's go. We have the car. We have a competitive car. Let's try to do our best, but nothing like really trying, right? Yeah. After funny enough, we got second place on all the first 3 rounds. and we were leading the competition by a very high amount of points. Luckily, because not the same guys won, so by points we were pretty good through for the last round. So it was good that it was like that, because I didn't have to push the car that we knew that was hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to just drive this car through the line to get the championship. So it was a great feeling not having to do that, but it was also kind of sucked because for the last round, I was like, or the whole team, we were like, let's not mess up the car. We didn't practice. We didn't do anything because we had to drive through the line to be able to like get those extra points to win the championship. So it was kind of like bittersweet that I won without
Too
really
much competition.
or really trying, you know, like it's kind of, it felt bad in that sense, but it was a great feeling that, wow, we made it so good that we kind of like have the championship.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way for us to not be able to get that championship, which funny enough, it was very tight. If something would have happened to the car, if it would have broken through during practice and we weren't able to make it through the line, and one guy had to win the whole thing, he would have taken
the championship.
Now, he's a good buddy of mine, Ryan Acevedo, and he did win that round, you know. So if we wouldn't have made it through the line, he would have gotten the championship.
Oh.
So
there was a little bit of pressure there.
Definitely.
It wasn't just as like, I just got to run it and that's it.
Yeah, and that's why we didn't do the practice, you know, because you run that risk. Something happens to the car and then you can't drive it through a line. We would have lost the championship just by practicing.
Yep.
You know, so it's kind of like, man, it's you have that. It's like, I wanted to drive, you know, everybody was driving and I'm just sitting there like, you know.
It's like, can I go out, please?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, let's talk a little bit about tires. Obviously, drifting is a balance of disbalance. It's maintaining the car. It's maintaining the car out of control, but you're in control of the car. By doing so, you're pushing your tires to the limits. How do you go about but more like, what kind of setup do you have to be in when it comes to sponsorships or when it comes to purchasing the tires? Because you can run through a set of tires, and I mean a set of tires, just 2 tires. It's not even.
Not four.
It's not like grip racing that you're using all 4. Yeah, you're using a set of tires every 5 laps.
So
depending on the track, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so it comes down to basically Secnova, the company that I'm running now. And thanks to Secnova is the reason that I'm actually competing in FD, because it comes back again to, you know, making this make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest misconceptions for drifting that most people that are not familiar with it, they think that we need less grip in the rear, when it's absolutely the opposite. At least for competitive drifting. On competitive drifting, you're trying to get away from the guy that's following you. Or when you're following, you're trying to get as close as possible to the guy that's in front of you. And one of the ways to achieve that is through grip. You know, grip is what allows you to be faster and stay there. So through a weekend, we can probably do from 20 to 30 tires we'll go through. Yeah. And there's different setups that we do for the car. So for example, for Fuel Fest, we take as much grip as we can out of the car because we're just trying to make the tires last. Mm-hmm. We're not really competing, even though there's a competition, but it's for fun. There's nothing on the line. We just...
You don't go all out.
You don't go all out. Yeah. You try to make a show for the fans. So it's an understanding within all the guys, okay, guys, we're not gripping up the cars because we're just trying to drive for fun. So ultimately, the main goal for competitive drifting is you get 2 laps, right? You get your lead and your follow. Mm-hmm. Now, the best thing that you can do is use up all the tire on those 2 laps, mm-hmm. right? So you kind of play with the grip on the car to grip it as much as possible that is drivable, because that's another thing. The more that you grip the car, the harder it is for you to
slide.
drive it.
Yeah.
You essentially have to like shove it into the corner, get on the gas, and it's a lot harder to drive overall.
More aggressive.
It's
You
more
gotta be-
aggressive.
Yeah, you gotta be more aggressive.
Easier to spin out or easier to straighten out. The car basically, when you have that much grip, it just wants to straighten. It wants to go straight. So that's the difference between competitive drifting and drifting for demos or for fun. You essentially add grip as much as possible that you can. So by the end of the second lap, your tires are bald or completely gone.
Yeah.
If you're leaving meat on the tires, that means that you're not as fast as you can be.
Interesting.
So that's one of the ways to look at it, essentially.
Yeah.
And another reason for that is, you know, you finish some scrubs and let's say you have another lap in them. You can't use them for that competition because you're not allowed to change tires between a lead and a follow run. You're supposed to
use
do
the same set.
You have to use the same set on a lead and your follow, and then you can change for the next battle if you win it.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that our team and we go for, try to use as much tire as possible. Now, funny enough, there's a difference between if you do 2 lead runs, you're going to kill the tires faster. If you do 2 follow runs, you kill them slower. Like,
Because you're managing, if you're following, you're managing more the closivity.
the proximity, yes.
Interesting.
So it's another thing that for practice, we have to practice, for FD at least, or anywhere else, we have to practice a lead and a follow run. That way we have reference of how we're doing. And also we always try to leave a little bit more of meat on that tire, just in case for some reason we went, you know, a little bit extra wheel speed or something. So we don't run out of tires to the end.
Interesting.
One of the reasons we love Segnova is because how long they last during drift, and we can maximize the grip out of them and still get some left at the end. And it's basically the reason that I went all in with the brand. I knew it was a really good product, and for drifting, it's amazing. They're amazing road racing tires as well. And it's easy when you have a product that basically sells itself.
Yep.
You know, you don't really have to
Now,
advertise it.
With Segnova, from my understanding, for the research I've done, obviously it's not a Hankook tire, right? But you essentially, with this kind of tires, you're getting the best bang for your buck with Segnova because they're not Hankook prices, you know? So it's like, what's it cost for, I was looking at it, you're running what, 255, 35?
So for Prospect, we have to run 255s, but overall, we usually just use 265. It's a more complete tire.
Okay. What's it cost in one of those tires
So
for the public?
265s, it's like 140, I think 148, something like that is the retail price for them.
And they're grippy.
They're
tire.
grippy, yeah. So at least the Super Sports, and then which are 300 tread wear, and then there's a 200 tread wear line. And then they also have a drift tire made specifically for drifting that's extremely grippy and long lasting. If you look at them, they look like drag radials, basically.
Okay.
But the grip out of them and the amount of smoke they throw out, it was a tire that was engineered for drifting.
Nice.
So it's like 8 millimeter gap that, you know, you have so much meat that you can wear down, which it's a more expensive tire, but you end up saving money in the long run.
You can use it longer.
You can use it longer.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's good. Well, Luis, it was fun. If you want to plug the company, where can they get, if they want to start getting into drifting and they need some drifting tires? Because I'll give you a funny story. I did a little bit of drifting back in my day. Nothing crazy. Back in Canada Line, I was mentioning it to you. And I had counting my stock wheels, I had 3 sets of wheels, meaning 6 wheels. And I used to go out of the dumpsters, pick up used tires and like whatever they were throwing out and use them just to have fun.
Yeah.
If somebody like that person, like me back in the day, had an additional funds to be able to actually get the car, get the tires, and start on his or her way to maybe doing something in the drifting events, where can they get the tires?
So I did the same thing when I started drifting, you know, dumpster driving for tires. But it's funny because everybody makes that mistake that you get these tires there are half-lives, basically, you'd call them.
Or quarter.
You get 2-3 laps, and you have to go and change the tires, and it's eventually you start to realize, like, okay, I could spend some money on them, and I could do a whole day of drifting in one set, rather than carrying all these wheels, all these tires, and having to spend all this time changing tires. It's one of the, I think it's the mistake that we all make we have that one guy that we see that he comes to the track on a brand new set of tires and we're here changing, and then this guy keeps drifting, and towards the end of the day, it's like, man, how did you not change tires the whole day?
You got me flashbacks just
that's
because that's exactly what I found. Like, how is this guy still sliding around?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I'm over here on my third pair, and you're still on the same wheel.
Exactly. But it comes with the territory of learning, essentially.
Yeah.
So if you want to have tires like this that are gonna last you 40 laps or something like that, it always depends on the setup of the car, right? If you have a 500 horsepower car and you're gripping it up, it's not like us. We try to kill the tires in 2 laps.
Yeah.
But if we're doing for fun, so for example in Tampa, the whole day I used one set of tires on the pro car.
Wow.
So
a Fuel Fest
Tampa, yeah.
Only one set of tires.
Only one set of tires. All we did is take the grip out of the car and ease up on the throttle and follow. We did all follow runs.
Yeah.
And the whole day driving and one set of tires, essentially.
Wow.
So if you guys need brand new tires that are gonna last long, SecnovaUS.com. That's where you can get them. We have multiple warehouses throughout the United States, and you can pick up from the warehouses if you're in one of the locations. If you're close to me, you can pick up from here in my shop as well.
Awesome. Luis, thank you for your time.
Thank you
I
for
know it's
having
valuable.
me.
I appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I've known drifting before, but not into the details. And like I told you at the beginning, this interview wasn't about drifting. It was about you. It was about who you are as a person, where you came from, and where you are now. So I appreciate the time that you took to do this interview with me. And, I think we spoke a little bit about a little surprise that we might give the viewers about a little car that's sitting outside. And I think we should do that.
Let's get it.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.